When you're in the market for a new cell phone, but aren't ready for that 2-year commitment, make Yakety Yak Wireless your first stop. Our experienced sales staff will help you choose the phone that's best for you. We carry a vast array of basic and smartphones, and at Yakety Yak, you can try it before you buy it. Looking to save some money? We sell used and unlocked phones and provide the best in iPhone repair. Come into Yakety Yak Wireless for all your mobile phone needs.
Welcome to the Yakety Yak Wireless video on fixing the iPad 2. This is a customer unit. It is broken and damaged in multiple areas, so we can get a real example of how to fix it. I like this better than other videos that just show it from a single point of view of one that's already been repaired 100 times. You can see the corners on this one are bent in. It was beat up pretty bad in its fall. It has 3 corners that are broken and the screen. We do a full test out of these before we go and actually take them apart, make sure that the digitizer still responds, the LCD is okay, volume, power, Wi-Fi, camera, the mute switch, everything. So now we're going to go ahead and turn it off. One very important thing on fixing these, make sure you don't turn the power on while you're fixing it. Tools that we're going to use. I found these spudgers on eBay. They're a very good spudger. They're very flat, thin, and sharp, and you use about 5 or 6 of them. I use an X-Acto knife. X-Acto knife will help separate the screen from the plastic bezel edging. We use a 000 Phillips head screwdriver, a pair of tweezers, and lastly a blue pry bar. And we use the blue pry bar to actually disconnect the flex cables so that we don't create a shock and ruin the iPad. When the edges are bent, I use a pair of pliers and a file. This is because the back of the iPad 2 is aluminum, and you need to be able to file off the edges. And lastly, I do use a variable heat gun. If you don't have one of those, set your regular heat gun to low, so it should be around 150 degrees. Areas to watch out for. The upper right is very important. There are 2 exposed flex cables that you can get into, and then the lower right down here is where the Wi-Fi Bluetooth antenna is. If you're doing a 3G across the top, you're going to have 2 antennas as well. This is a Wi-Fi only version, so we won't have that to worry about. We start off with the heat gun. I will be speeding up the heat gun efforts here to help keep the video short. Now, one thing to remember is we do start in the lower right-hand corner. I like to get that Wi-Fi Bluetooth antenna out of the way first to make sure that we aren't damaging it. And then we use the spudger. As you can see here, because this iPad is broken quite extensively, this is a real-life example of what it's going to take to fix one of these things. So we're going to go and we start peeling off the glass. Don't go in too far with the spudger because you can scratch the LCD. You'll see that I get into where you can actually see it on the other side of the digitizer. You'll actually be able to see it poke through a little bit. I do this, you won't damage the LCD unless you go really far in. So you'll see that I apply lots of heat in doing this. The more heat, the better. You're dealing with a very strong adhesive on an iPad that you need to get off. And then the area just to the right of the home button, right where I'm going after now, is basically where the Bluetooth Wi-Fi antenna starts. It's a thin sheet of an antenna that's actually attached between the back of the iPad and the digitizer. And so you have to be really careful that you don't cut it. If you cut it, you can replace it, but it's another part that you have to order. So there you can kind of see the spudger popping in on the other side of the digitizer. As long as you don't go in too far, you won't damage the LCD. One of the things I like to tell people here is that you want constant pressure, but you want to control that pressure. You don't want the spudger to slip and go gouging in. So you want to be kind of careful on how you do it and take your time. This video is about 40 minutes long. Without the speeded up areas, this took me about an hour to fix. Expect that the first time you fix your iPad, it should take about 2 to 3 hours. So what you're going to see me do now is flip it up sideways here. And it's kind of hard to tell, but what I'm trying to do is make sure that I find that Bluetooth Wi-Fi antenna and separate it out so that it comes off of the digitizer, so that when I lift the digitizer later, I'm not pulling that antenna up. This is one of the most critical parts of the repairs right here. So you can see I'm applying pressure on that spudger to kind of try and separate the digitizer from the back along with heat. Yeah, because of all the broken glass in here, it's going to make it a lot easier for me to separate it. On ones where the glass isn't broken down low, you just keep lifting it, and then you'll be able to see where the antenna attaches to the glass and get the spudger between the antenna and the digitizer to separate it. You just go really slow and carefully here. You can see I'm probably getting ready to lower the iPad back down so that way you can see the antenna. Again, I'm trying to get between the antenna and the digitizer, and I'm just chipping up the glass. The antenna is pretty strong itself. You just don't want to tear at the edge where it connects to it actually screws down to the midframe, as well as has a cable that comes off of it that goes down and connects to the motherboard. You don't want to tear either of those two, which are usually one's along the bottom left-hand side of it, and the other's along the top left-hand side of it. I'm just kind of separating everything out here. More heat. You can never apply too much heat in this situation. Just make sure you're not above 150 degrees. So there you can see the antenna. That little gold contact is part of where it connects. You just want to make sure that you don't tear it. While we're doing this, I'm going to give you a word about digitizers. The digitizers that I buy come with the adhesive already laid. Some of them actually come with the home button already attached. If you're buying your digitizers off of eBay and you're spending less than, say, $50 or $60 for them, you are buying an inferior part. So make sure that you try and buy ones that are listed as assemblies rather than just the pure digitizer. You want to make sure that they actually have the glass and the digitizer bonded together. You can't use one without the other because it's a very thin mesh that's applied. Having the adhesive already pre-laid also makes life a lot easier when you go to put the thing back together. Okay, so now I'm applying heat to the left-hand side on the other side of the home button. As you come around the home button, make sure that you're careful of it. Don't tear around it. And now I'm actually using the knife here to separate. As you can see, mine is broken, so it's a lot easier to tell, but there is a thin plastic bezel between the glass and the edge of the iPad, and you don't want to lift up the bezel, you actually want to lift up the glass on the inside of it, as you should be able to see from all of the video. Like I said, at the home button, it's not particularly fragile, but don't go diving down into the home button. Just come up next to it. There shouldn't be any adhesive right around the home button, so you should be okay with not having to separate it right there. Over on the bottom left-hand side, about 2 inches up from the bottom is the cable where the digitizer is. So if you go all the way in, you will cut that cable. Since you're replacing it, it's not critical. I like to try and avoid cutting it just to make sure that, I'm being careful in what I do. So right where I'm working right now, there's nothing that you need to worry about cutting right there. You can just get up in there with the spudger and really just separate it well. As you can see, I use lots of spudgers. Try and keep the contact broken between the digitizer and the back of the iPad. Since this one was broken so badly, it's really coming off in pieces. I do have some that only have a single split, and we're able to lift that digitizer almost completely. So you can see here, right where I'm at now, that's right where the digitizer cable is. So I want to be careful about not going in too deep. Lay some more heat down. And remember, I did speed up the heat 4 times on the video, so that kind of tells you how much heat we're actually putting down.
This is a 2 and not a 3, right?
Once you get past where the cable is, you can start going up further. Notice it's split right there. And it's going to do that when the glass has weakness in it. Now we're going to go up the right side. Remember, on the right side, about 2 inches down from the top, there are two cables. One is for the volume button and one is for the power button. And they are both exposed and easily cut. So if you go up too high, I usually stop about 3 inches down on the right side from the top is where I'll stop with my prying. And I'll just use, when I lift the digitizer is when I'll actually get to the point where I'll just separate it using heat and lifting the digitizer rather than getting in there with any pry tools.
What I would probably do is lift it up.
You can see here the glass is just shattering all the way up. As we repair this, as you get the digitizer off, one of the things you want to make sure and do is you want to clean it up really well. If there's any residual glass left in there, any pieces of glass, and you lay down that new digitizer, the second you push down on it afterwards when you're using it, you'll split the glass again. So you want to make sure and take the extra time to go and clean off all the excess, the residual glass and residual glue. You can see I try and take it up as I go along. I will say this glass is very sharp, so be careful with it around your fingers. Eye protection is always a good thing to wear.
Indentures, a barrage, and then a 3G8 gate that won't boot.
And one of the things you'll notice is the way I'm holding the iPad to keep it from moving around. Your first inclination is going to be able to grab it up by where that power button is. You absolutely do not want to turn the power on. The reason why you don't want to turn the power on is that if the power's on and the digitizer's broken to a point where the cable won't allow you to turn it back off, you'll have to finish taking apart the digitizer and the iPad with the power on, which is a very dangerous thing. Okay, so on the right side we've gone up as high as I'm willing to go before we get to those cables, and now we're going to work on the rest of the left side and then the top. On the left side over here, once you get past the digitizer cable, there's nothing to worry about all the rest of the way up. And you can see, as I'm doing this, I'm trying to be pretty careful of that plastic bezel. You can actually replace it. It kind of clips into place, and you can buy replacements for it. I like to try and avoid, the stock one's always the best one to have, so I like to try and be careful around that plastic bezel and try and keep it in as good a shape as possible. One of the other things, as you repair these, this one you'll notice the corners are all bent, and you'll see it as we get further along in the video. But the glass actually just sits down flush onto it. So if you have any bends in there, it's going to keep the glass from sitting perfectly flush, and in which case you're going to need to put it in a case that covers around the front of it and holds it crimped down for the rest of its life. It'd be something like a Trident AMS case or an OtterBox Defender case or an OtterBox Reflex case. It wraps over the top of the screen and helps hold the screen onto the back of the iPad. Because remember, it's just adhesive, and nothing's going to be as good as it was coming out of the factory, no matter how good of a job you do. So eventually, dust will get between the screen and the back of the iPad and cause the adhesive to lift. So we always recommend for our customers for these things to go into protective cases. The cases that Apple sells are, for the most part, useless. I wouldn't put them on my iPad. So you can see here we're just chipping away the glass. You notice it's creating kind of a bare spot between the main part of the digitizer and the edge of the frame. That's where most of the adhesive is. So if it comes up that way, you're okay. You'll see here in a few minutes when I actually lift the entire thing up. It's still attached to some degree on the inside, but it's a lot less of an attachment, so the screen will actually lift. Now we're going to do the top left corner up here. This is where that bend is, so the glass is all shattered up here, so it should all just come off in little pieces. You can see here I'm just lifting it off. One of the other things is as you start doing this, you're going to get glass everywhere. It's good to take time every once in a while to lift your iPad up, brush off the area, and then redo it, so that way you're not scratching the back of your iPad with broken glass. Now we're doing the top part. Since this is a Wi-Fi model, there are no antennas, no 3G antennas in the top part of this iPad, so you can just cruise straight across. The one thing to watch out for is right in the center is the front-facing camera. It does have a little metal bracket around it. You can't damage it per se, but you should just watch how far you go in with the spudger when you get near it. You should only go in about 1/8 of an inch right there. Because again, there's no adhesive right around it, so you're okay. So I'm going to go and lay some more heat here. And again, remember, we're getting over towards that top right-hand side where we really want to be careful of those cables. What I'm just trying to do is I'm trying to separate the adhesive from the screen so that way we can lift it up from the bottom towards the top. See here, we're going all the way across. And we're not cruising down the side at all. We're just staying on the top part of it, getting everything separated. Okay, so now we're actually going to lift the digitizer up and to the left. So you take heat and apply heat all the way around all 4 corners, get it good and hot. Because like I said, there's still a little bit of adhesive holding the screen on. And then you're going to come in from the lower right where you can shove a spudger further up in there, and then try and get your hand underneath it, being careful of the LCD. So here I'm just moving the spudgers around. And you're going to try and get in with your hand. You can see here I've actually stuck my thumb between the digitizer and the LCD, and I'm not pushing on the LCD, I'm actually pushing on the edge of the frame. And I'm going to use some more heat because we want to release up here on the upper right where those 2 flex cables are that you don't want to tear. Again, they are replaceable as well, but they are a royal pain to replace. You want to avoid it if at all possible. So as I'm giving it heat, you can see I'm pushing with my right thumb and finger, trying to get it to separate, just to get it to lift up. And it may break around those cables, which is fine. So you can see here I've got it to separate. There's still some adhesive I'm just going to pop off here. There. And now the screen's lifted all the way out. Be careful around the LCD. You want to make sure that you don't scratch it. You can get glass and stuff on it. It's okay. Just keep your fingers off of it. So there's one of those cables right there. It's about 1 inch down on the right side. You can see it. The other one is underneath this piece of glass right here. Now we're going to have to get this off super carefully. So again, lots of heat. And then I just try and use my fingers, or if I take the spudger and I'm only going in tiny amounts with the spudger, a little bit at a time, because that other cable is really easy to split. You can see in this picture, you can really see that plastic bezel around the outside edge that you want to leave in place. Okay. So again, I'm just trying to come in little bits. Really gently and slowly. If you get anxious here and you really start pushing on it, you will cut that cable. I know this video looks a lot different from other videos out there because most of the other people take an iPad that they fixed 4 or 5 times and they go around it with a little blue pry stick or a guitar pick, and the screen just lifts up all beautiful and pretty. And I just want people to see that that is just not the way it happens. I mean, no one's fixing one that already has a perfectly good screen unless there's something else wrong with it. You're going to be fixing one that's broken, and broken ones get messy on these things. So we're still working at getting that piece up. Okay, almost there. One last little piece of glass here. Again, you see me applying lots of heat to this. Just to get it to lift up. At 150 degrees, the glass is hot, but not so hot that it would damage any of the LCD or any of the cables underneath. There. Now you can see that other flex cable piece I was talking about right there. And it literally just lays in a little groove over the frame. And so if you go in there with your spudger, you will catch it every time and tear it. We've seen a lot of people fix it themselves, bring them into me to have me fix that after they tear it. Okay, so next we have to take out the LCD. The LCD is held in by 4 Phillips screws. Before we do this, I'm just going to blow a little excess air on and blow the glass off of the LCD. We use lots of canned air at our shop. Okay, 4 screws. Go ahead and take these screws out here. You set the screws apart. Those are the only screws you need to undo for the entire repair process. Then you use a spudger from the right side and gently just pop the screen up. It should just lift right up. You lift it up towards your left, and then you're going to have to disconnect the cable holding it. The cable is right there. Now, one of the things on this cable, it's got a little metal prong that holds it down. Use your fingernail to pop it up, and then release it. Once you release it, then you can push the cable out. I'll show you here on a close-up. So we've popped up that metal prong, and then we just take the cable and pull it out, straight out, and lift the LCD up. So you can see that cable with the metal prong on it right there. It's just a little retaining ring that holds it in place. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2 is to remove the digitizer, and this is where most people ruin their iPad. You have to flip up 2 little plastic pieces, there and there. Use a spudger, not a metal tool, to do it, and you go very gently to flip them up. They flip up towards the top of the iPad, and you'll feel them release. If you break these, your iPad's gone, so don't break them. Okay, once they're both flipped up like that, then you can actually remove the digitizer. The digitizer flex cable is held down by a couple pieces of adhesive, so you're going to have to remove those pieces of adhesive. So first you lift up like this to remove one piece, and then you grab the second one right here, and then you just pull straight out. Notice the 2 white lines on the digitizer cable right there? That's how you know you seated it back correctly. Okay, now we've got the digitizer. One of the things we pull off the digitizer is the home button. And there's 2 ways to do this. If your digitizer came with a home button already on it, then what you want to do is you just want to undo the 2 screws here and lift off the sensor for it. Because the stock sensors are way better than the aftermarket ones, you just replace it on your aftermarket one. If you didn't come with a home button, then you actually don't need to do this step right here. You can just use a heat gun and remove the entire assembly, which I'll show you here in a second. Okay. So now I'm going to just heat up the entire assembly. It's just held onto the digitizer with adhesive. So just get it good and hot. Use your spudger, pry underneath it, and the whole thing will just lift right off of there. It's a piece of metal, so it's fairly stout. You want to make sure that if there's any pieces of broken glass on it, you clean off the broken glass. So that piece comes out, and then you can get the home button out. Just push from the other side with your finger. And so if your digitizer came with a home button, you don't need to do this. If it doesn't, you have to save those parts. The rest of it, you can trash. Okay, so now you're going to see me go in hyper motion here. And all I'm doing is I'm cleaning off all the excess, the residual adhesive and any pieces of glass. Used canned air to blow it out of the center of the iPad. You don't want anything floating around in the center, otherwise it'll rattle when you put it back together. Be really careful up here around these cables. And you want to get as clean as possible. Some people use solvents. I don't like to use it because it keeps the new adhesive from sticking, so I just use the spudger. And it's almost like you're removing paint from an old piece of furniture. You just scrape at it. Make sure you get everything out of there. After we do this, we're actually going to bend down the corners. You can see me using canned air here. Okay, this thing's all clean now. So now we're going to use the pliers. And you won't have to do this if you don't have bent corners. In this case, that corner is bent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pliers. I'm going to use them in this corner. But first, I'm going to peel back this plastic bezel a little bit. And then I'm going to bend it out. Now, it's aluminum. Aluminum does not have a memory, so it's not like it's going to snap back into place like a car body panel. It's actually going to tear. And so you want to bend it out, and it will tear off a little bit. And then you're going to use the file to file it down and get it smooth. You just need it out of the way so that the screen will sit as flat as possible. Obviously, be careful with the file. You don't want to damage any more of the iPad than you have to. Okay, now the other corner that I have is going to be the lower right corner of this. I'm just checking here to make sure everything sits nice and flush. And getting that plastic bezel back into place. Okay, the lower right corner. Important here, when you do the lower right corner, don't set it down on the table, because if you do, you're going to turn the power on. So I'm actually holding it up in the air while I bend this piece out. This one's not as bad. Don't worry if part of the iPad tears off in your hand. It will. Just file it down and get it smooth as possible. Remember, this thing's going to have to live in a case anyway, so cosmetics at this point are pretty much a forgotten item. Okay, all the corners look to be okay. We've cleaned it off. Now, the other thing you need to do is you need to make sure you clean off the LCD. Blow it off first, and then use a clean microfiber cloth to gently clean anything off of it. Fingerprints are your absolute enemy here. You want to avoid fingerprints at all costs. So try not to touch the digitizer. Try not to touch the LCD with your fingers. This is our part. You can see it came with all the adhesive. It also came with the camera retaining ring up top, that metal camera retaining ring. Most digitizers will come with this, so you don't need to replace it. One of the things we're going to do, I do not like the way they do adhesive in the lower right or in the top, right there, or up top up here. So I actually remove what they have, and I take some extra 3M adhesive and apply it to the digitizer so that we get a better stick in those areas. Especially important in the lower left down here. So very gently peel this off. If you miss with the tweezers or like an X-Acto knife or something and you scratch the digitizer, it will show through on the other side. So one easy remedy for this, if you do scratch it, get a black Sharpie and color in the scratch. It won't be perfect, but it'll be really hard to tell that you've actually scratched the digitizer. Okay, so I'm just removing the adhesive out of the way of that one area. Then I'm going to line it up, take an X-Acto knife, and cut to fit a piece, and then lay it in the spot right here. This will help your digitizer stick down much better. So here I'm going to do the same thing up top. I'm going to peel off that little stock adhesive right here. So that's the cover for it. This is the actual adhesive I'm peeling off now. And then I'm going to go and cut pieces to fit. You don't have to do this, but I figure the more dust you can keep from getting under your digitizer, the longer it's going to last. Just make sure you don't want to overlap the adhesive that you put down on top of any of the other adhesive, because otherwise it'll be too thick and your screen won't sit flush. One other note, if you do buy a digitizer that doesn't come with adhesive and you have to buy an adhesive kit for it, look on eBay or on any of the sites up there. The ones that have the black adhesive, that adhesive is excellent. They're really good kits if you can get that. They're usually more expensive. 3M's okay, but the black stuff's even better. Okay, so now we have our iPad and we have our digitizer. There's actually covers on both sides of the digitizer right now protecting my fingers from putting fingerprints on it. We're going to set the cable out, peel that piece of tape off of it. And now the digitizer cable is going to sit down into the connectors that are on the motherboard. And again, be really, really careful with these connectors. If you break the connectors, your iPad's gone. There's no way to fix it. So I'm going to go ahead and seat these into place. There's 2 white lines on each of them that you should still be able to see when it's in all the way, but they should be straight across, and that'll tell you that you've got it in there properly. I'm going to zoom down here so you can see what I'm talking about. See those 2 white lines? They're both straight across. Now we're going to take our finger and just flip these down. Flip down both of them. And now there's a little blue tape there. That's adhesive that helps hold the digitizer down, the digitizer cable. One of the things on this digitizer cable is it lays flush and then it tucks up underneath the left side of the iPad there. And you want to push it in as far as you can, because if you don't push it in, it's going to boil up underneath the digitizer and that corner will not sit flush. So it's just going to create a loop under the left-hand side. Okay, so here's the LCD. I've gotten it all cleaned off. It's going to drop in here. Notice I'm avoiding touching it with my fingers, just the edges. Now we're going to plug it back in. Be careful with this plug-in. It does have a lot of prongs. You want to make sure it goes in flush, and then you clip that little retaining clip down into place. It's kind of hard to show this on video, but it's pretty self-explanatory when you're working with it. Now I'm going to clip it down, pop the clip down into place. I'll zoom down here to show you what it looks like. So you can see the clip is down and it's in there nice and flush. And then you're going to go ahead and lay down the LCD. Right now, I actually don't screw it on in. We're going to test it first to make sure that the digitizer doesn't have any dead spots. The last thing you want to do is build this whole thing up and find out that you have a bad part. So first we're going to slide the LCD out of the way. It's connected, but we just move it aside a little bit so that we can actually push the digitizer down in where it needs to go. You can use the spudger, you can use your finger or whatever else, but you want to tuck it all the way under there. So see, I'm using a spudger here. I'm coming in, just pushing it into that cavity as far as it wants to go. And then when you actually lay the digitizer down, you want to come in from about a 20-degree angle and slide it in till it meets the edge of the iPad. And that'll help push that cable down underneath. You want to try and avoid the cable being caught on the adhesive, because like I said, you'll know because the lower left part of the iPad will not sit flush anymore. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pop this LCD back into place. Again, not screwing it down yet. And we're going to push. Now see, I'm coming in from about 20 degrees and I'm pushing it to slide it into that spot. Even though we're going to take it back up here in a second, I do it each time to kind of build a memory in that cable. Notice there's no home button on it. Don't need the home button for this part. We're going to test the digitizer. Fire the thing on, make sure it lights. If it doesn't light at this point, don't panic. You may still be okay. You may just need to do a soft reset on it, so you can put the home button in and try that. And I just test to make sure that there's no dead spots in the digitizer. I just kind of go through all the different areas of it. Looks okay, so we're going to turn it back off. Don't do anything till the power is completely off on it. After the power's off, I open it back up. Okay. And now we're going to lay the home button in place. The home button itself is going to go into the actual digitizer, and it should just stick right in there. There's nothing fancy about it. It's got a tab at the bottom of it, holds it kind of in place. And then the actual pickup assembly for it, we don't attach back to the digitizer. I found it's easier just to lay it in place on the base of the iPad. You see a lot of people attach it to the digitizer, but if you don't get it exactly where it needs to go, the home button will not click. So by laying it in the actual iPad and then sticking the digitizer against it when you close it actually causes it to be in the right spot. That's a little tip that we've picked up over time. So it goes with the wide end down. You can see how it sits in here. And it just literally fits right into its own little spot. Now we're going to go and peel off all the adhesive. And so as you peel off the adhesive, before the adhesive, we're actually going to take off the cover for the digitizer. Now we do this so that we can check for any sort of imperfections or smudges on the digitizer. A lot of these digitizers actually come with imperfections on them. So we're just blowing off any excess dust right now. Now we've peeled off the inside cover, so we're going to close it. Not all the way, but it's easier to see the imperfections against a black background. So then we're going to peel off the outside cover as well. And what we're looking for here is, when they made the screen, if the worker's got a fingerprint on it or something like that. And this one actually does have a smudge on it that we have to clean off. The worst thing in the world is to go build this thing up and find a big old thumbprint stuck on either the LCD or the digitizer when you close it. So in this case, we've got one that we've got to clean off on the upper inside edge. Right there. I've had some digitizers I've ordered that have had like an oil smear on them from their construction phase. So this one I'm checking to see if it's on the outside. It's not. So now we got to open it up and carefully clean the inside. Make sure that you're using a very clean microfiber cloth. Don't use any sprays or anything. You should just be able to use a cloth to get it off. Check it again. Looks like it's still there, so I'm going to do it one more time here. Okay, looks like we're getting it clean. Lay it down, check it again. So it looks like I pretty much got that. Let's go ahead and open it up. We're going to peel off the interior adhesive. We're going to put in the screws for the LCD, and we're going to put this thing back together. Okay, here we go. So now we're just peeling off the adhesive. You can just use a thin pair of tweezers to get this adhesive off. Again, try not to touch the digitizer or the LCD, because otherwise you're going to have to clean it again. And remember, be careful with those tweezers. Go really lightly on pulling off this adhesive. Don't nick the digitizer, otherwise you'll have it's just painted on there. So if you nick it, it's going to show through when you close it. Make sure you get off all the covers for the adhesive. Got the last two here. Okay, now we're going to go and we're going to put the screws back in the LCD. One thing to note, if you look at the top left-hand side of the digitizer, you can see at the top of it there, you can see where it attaches to the front camera. You may have to reapply that if it's not on your digitizer. If you do, do it exact same way we do the bottom one. Just lay it actually over the camera, not over the digitizer, and then the digitizer will stick to it when you close it. Okay, one last shot with the dust off. Now again, we come in from that 20-degree angle, and the digitizer in the lower left should sit completely flush once you get it in right. You just got to work at it to get that cable to slide into its little groove. Okay, so I'm going and actually getting it straight in here, get it aligned, and then slowly start to apply the adhesive around the edges. Make sure everything looks nice and flush, that there's no gapping. You can see down here in that lower left, it's sitting flush. Making sure the home button's seated correctly, getting everything done all around it. And once it's done all around it, we're going to check the power and the home button action and do a final test out. On these final test outs, we test everything. We test the Wi-Fi, we test the buttons, we test to make sure that the camera works. So here we go, testing the camera. Just making sure there's the front camera, back camera works. So as I'm testing this out, I'll just let you know that if you decide that you don't want to take on this repair, you can call us at Yakety Yak Wireless at 817-399-1000. Visit us on the web at www.yaketupdfw.com, or email us at gladeroad@yaketupdfw.com. Thanks for watching the video. I appreciate your time and patience today, and hopefully your repair goes as well as this one did.